I'm Bree Luck, and you are listening to the Pause to Go podcast, where we explore the process of turning life's transitions into stellar transformations. You can expect interviews with experts, straight talk with remarkable humans, and conversations about making the most of every phase of life. Because when we approach life's stickiest spots with curiosity, support, and a little bit of inspiration, anything is possible. So whether you're on your way to work or settling in with your favorite beverage, together we can pause to go. As a solopreneur, I really like the flexibility to work from pretty much anywhere, so I'm happy to head down to Code-Based Co-working, where I can enjoy the company of others while I tackle my to-do list. Also, they have a state-of-the-art, consumer-friendly podcasting studio that is, frankly, my home away from home. So head over to Code-Based Co-working, check it out, and when you do, tell them that Bree sent you. Today's conversation is with Lisa Tricomi, an actor, a creative arts therapist, and a dear friend of mine for over 20 years. This chat was actually recorded way back in early September, and it was perhaps the first truly open conversation I had with anyone about menopause. I saved it for now, because this is the final Menopause with Friends episode, and it just felt right to return to the beginning to wrap this up. Well, I say that it's the last Menopause with Friends episode, I may take it back, but for now, it's the final one. And as I was pulling this together for you, there were a couple of things that really struck me. First, most talk about menopause is incredibly gendered. And for those who have been listening, you may have noticed that we've been shifting somewhat from speaking about women in perimenopause to people in perimenopause. In this episode, we don't do that. We didn't know then what we know now. I didn't know then what I know now, which is that menopause happens to people, not just women. And I'm a woman, Lisa's a woman, we're both talking about it from our very gendered perspective, and that's fine. But I also just want to acknowledge it, because I hope that this information is useful to all humans who experience this phase of life. And the other thing is that Lisa had some very extreme effects of perimenopause. Physically, cognitively, and emotionally, really extreme. She actually texted me right after we recorded this episode, and she said, I really hope I didn't scare anybody off. And it's worth noting, because this conversation does cover some scary stuff. But my hope is that you will listen to this and feel less alone if you are in perimenopause and you are having feelings that are way off. Feelings that you might not ever think would be associated with perimenopause. Or if you're still having pretty regular periods that you might not even realize could be related to hormonal shifts that you've been largely unaware of. So I said that this is the last Menopause with Friends episode, but I'm still putting together a final episode for this season that addresses questions that you still have about perimenopause and menopause. And now I'm super excited because I have this link that you can click on to leave me an audio message. The link is in the show notes and in my Instagram bio at The Lovely Unbecoming, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd really love to hear your questions, and I'd also just love to hear your feedback. Let me know if these conversations about perimenopause and menopause have changed the way you understand midlife transitions. Because I believe deeply that by connecting, we can both feel less alone in our own experiences and also have a greater impact collectively on responding to these challenges with greater knowledge and confidence. And so now, enjoy this conversation with my dear friend, Lisa. So Lisa and I were in grad school together. We studied drama therapy at NYU. Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah. Are we allowed to curse also?
Oh, totally.
Okay, great.
How can we talk about menopause and not curse?
Because I just was telling a friend and I said, I'm doing this, interview with NYU cohort. And because I was old as fuck when I went to graduate school, I'm like a decade ahead of a lot of people. So maybe something I say might be helpful to someone. I was like 40 years old almost when we were in grad school together. Crazy.
Whatever age you were, you brought so much to the program. And I loved going on that particular adventure with you. And I'm really happy to have you as a guide for me and for the listeners for this next part, because the truth is, like, one of the things I love about you is you don't suffer fools and you tell it like it is. And this is a place when we're talking about perimenopause and menopause, we need more of that shit.
We do.
We need more of that.
I could have used it.
There are two things that motivated me to do this whole series, because Pause to Go, and long term, it will be about transitions. I'm a coach. All of my clients are going through transitions. I mean, there's no one who's not, right? And over the last couple of months, I've been in a mastermind and I've had 53 new clients, Lisa.
Wow.
And most of them have been perimenopausal or have recently been through menopause. And I realized that I didn't know shit. And I'm there, like, and I don't know it. And so thank goodness in the last couple of years, there have been more books that have come out about it, really great resources, some more podcasts, but I really wanted to do a whole season.
Yeah.
And I wanted the season to be experts who are medical experts, people who are really specializing in self-care and coaching and taking care of the whole woman as they go through menopause. And then also to really have women who are willing to talk about their experiences. And that is you.
I just love to talk about my experiences all day long. I have so many. Pick a topic. I have experiences. I'm glad it's needed. It's necessary because, it's not a journey of menopause. It's like a journey of womanhood. Like it's and much like, oh, girls get their period. Well, yeah, but in all different kinds of ways. And it's as unique to each individual, it's not just a blanket thing that kind of happens. It happens uniquely to each person. So you can't just be like, and they got their period, it's like, no, there's a lot that goes on with that, or they stopped their period or whatever, it's a journey of womanhood.
It is. So let's go actually back to starting your period, right?
Okay.
Because it's hard to talk about stopping your period without talking about starting your period. We know that there's not been enough information out about menopause. Did you feel like you were prepared to start your period? What was that like for you?
I wasn't at all. And I had my mom, I was a late in life baby. So about the time I started my period, my mom was in menopause. And I learned, just like we're doing right here, I learned everything about my period from my friends who were getting their periods. Like my mom, way too late, came up to me with like some 1950s belt and pad that had like the little clips on it. And I'm already using tampons, I'm like, I got it, Mom. I got it. We're good. Like I suffered pads for like 2 or 3 periods. And I was like, this is not going to work for me at all. Like this lump of cloth, and I'm kind of oddly shaped in my hips and stuff. And they just never worked for me. And I was happy to do tampons like as soon as I could. No, it was a little bit of a shock and kind of gross and embarrassing. Just like this, some sort of brownish residue in my pants. And I couldn't really figure out what, but I had enough friends that had started their period. I was about 12, 13. Yeah, right around in there. And I pretty much had an easy go through the whole time I was menstruating. I just had a regular period. I had a couple days of flow. Nothing intense, nothing like what a lot of my friends went through. I did not have really PMS. I was, so it would have been in the mid 70s when I started my period. So about the time I was getting ready to have sex, I had a good excuse to get on the pill, which hadn't been around for that long already at this time. So I was like, I need to regulate my period, So it was a good time to get on the pill. That's how it was explained to my mother. So we didn't have to talk about that other thing, which was sex. We didn't have to talk about that either. And the pill didn't really work for me for very long. I had a lot of emotional reactions to the pill. I know it's much better now, but so I was off and on the pill for years just because I couldn't really tolerate it. But my period was just kind of normal. I had it like every month, like clockwork, 2 or 3 days. I had no PMS. I had no endometriosis. All these things that my friends suffered through, I just didn't really have. Like many things in life, I forgot about it every month too. Like for some reason, I had this thing for like 40 years, right? But it would surprise me every single month. It'd be like, God, why am I so achy? Why am I so tired? Oh my God, I'm bleeding. Okay. I never monitored, it was just, and I forgot about it. I still forget about it. Like I walk down a tampon aisle and I'm like, wow, I did that for like 40 some years and I don't think about it. I hear childbirth is like that also.
You forget what's painful about it.
Like when you're done, you're like, I'm never doing this again.
It is true. You were there. I mean, you weren't in the hospital, but you were around with my first pregnancy and when my first daughter was born, that was fine. And then, with my second pregnancy, I had this kid and both were C-sections for a multitude of reasons that are fit for another podcast. And after the second one, I turned to Jeff and I said, you are welcome to have another kid, but not with me. I'm done. I'm done. So yeah, I get that. And so you were not a tracker. Like now there's this whole, I have now that baby and her little sister are now 16 and 20.
So gorgeous.
They are
well done.
They are
well done.
Fierce women. Yeah. And they track, right? There are all these apps. There are all these things to do it. It's so different from us growing up.
Yeah. Just a surprise every month.
I'm curious to know if you felt the same way. I felt like I kind of knew, I went to an all-girls boarding school and I had a lot of girlfriends. I felt like I pretty much knew a lot about menstruation and periods and felt like I could joke about it and all of that. But now as I see my kids, I carried a lot of shame even then, just like not wanting people to see that you had a tampon in the bottom of your purse. Right? Like that was a real thing. Maybe it even still is on some level. Right. And my kids are like, here's a tampon.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have that too? Did you have that?
Oh yeah. Hide it when you're taking it to the bathroom because I don't know. I don't really know. I didn't feel like I had a lot of shame around my period. I felt like it was an inconvenience. That's what it felt like more than anything. And I must have had some because I would hide things like that too. But I don't feel like I actively felt it. It was probably more of like a subconscious thing. But mostly it just felt like an inconvenience because sometimes it kept me from having sex, depending on the partner or whatever, So yeah, it just felt like there was a couple days I had to be like, this is going to be a drag.
That's sort of the basic feeling around periods often is it's a drag.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting, right?
Cuts into your fun.
That's right. Yeah. Instead of being something that can even be positive and cleansing or remind us to slow down and get in touch with our bodies because we're operating in a world that was designed for men. Right. It wasn't. So of course it's a drag because it didn't fit the culture we were in.
Right.
When do you think you first became aware of perimenopause or menopause for you? Like what happened?
In retrospect, I know it was about the time I was at NYU. So my late 30s, early 40s, mostly just my periods got lighter and I was sweating at night, which was just so new for me. I was like, what is going on? Like I wasn't really sure what was happening, but just sweating while I slept. And that was about it for 3 years or so. And I was also trying to get pregnant at that time. I had decided, and this is really interesting. I had never wanted to have kids ever, not in my wheelhouse, no desire. When I hit perimenopause, it's like my biological clock was screaming at me. That's why when I have friends that are younger than I am, who are like, I just want to have a kid, I'm like, you know what? Good. Wait a couple years. And I was getting my, hormones checked and FSH and all the hormones and ovulation. And like, I was serious. I was looking into sperm donors because I didn't have a boyfriend at the time. And like, I was on it. And it to me, that is just like pure biological, like nothing I thought of or planned on. It was like boom, boom, boom. For about 2 or 3 years, I was like that. And then it went away, just went away like that.
So for you, one of the first stages was actually this like insatiable desire to breed.
Yeah.
To make a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. It was crazy. Yeah.
And I have to say, I know that feeling. I'm there right now. I don't want to have another kid. It's very clear. Like, I think I just made that clear, but I'm obsessed with babies. I'm obsessed. And I think it probably made more sense when people were having children younger. And by the time they were hitting menopause, new babies were coming along, they can help. And that last, like, quick, squeeze one out.
Squeeze one out. Right. There's a few of us left in here. All of my hormone levels were so low. And during that time, I did meet someone who I'm now married to. And so I wasn't using any birth control, hoping to get pregnant. And then twice, I got pregnant twice when I pretty much was beginning menopause. I got pregnant twice. Neither of them were viable, but I was about 48 or 49 at that time. So we were both just stunned because it's like we've been having sex for like 6 years, thinking nothing. And the first pregnancy, we were excited. And the second one, we were like, wow, we really dodged a bullet that time. We were like, oh God. But it was just, the irony behind all of it was just like, what the fuck? Like, what is happening? Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
And you were a late in life baby, right?
Yes, I was a late in life baby. My mom had me when she was 40. Yeah. Yeah. So the perimenopause started late 30s, early 40s with just the intense desire to have a baby that I'd never, ever, ever, ever had before, and sweating at night. Yeah. And then it kind of changed when I came back to Florida. So I was about 46 and I was getting ready to get married. And I started having, do you know what PMDD is?
Can you tell us?
Peri-menopausal dysphoric disorder. Well, actually, it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, but it happens a lot in perimenopause.
Okay.
And
so what does that mean?
It means it's like PMS ramped up. So I realized that I was having these really intense emotional things happen. I was still getting my period, but it was like really light. It was like a day of very little. But about 10 days prior, it was almost like I had really bad PMS. Like it took me a little while to figure out what was going on. And then I started having suicidal ideation, like really bad. Like I'd be, at this really happy time in my life. I'd be like, oh, we're out on the boat. I just wish this boat would crash and I would die, but everybody else would live. That's kind of, and I'm like, what is that? So I went and saw a psychiatrist and he's like, oh, you have this and we'll put you on some SSRIs, some antidepressants. And it lifted, but it was pretty intense. It was pretty, I just didn't know what was happening. And I really do, ascribe all of it to just this transition. And I have to say, I have a long history with anxiety and depression. So this was just that, like a Mack truck hitting me,
Something that I've read a bit about, that if we have any kind of mood disorders that sometimes they are exacerbated during that time. And if we have no history of mood disorders, that sometimes we develop them for the first time during that time. I've also read, and again, I am not a medical professional, but I've also read that for the most part, they seem to resolve after menopause. So 1 year after the final period, by then it's mostly begun.
Yeah.
That then you enter into. And are you there yet? I don't know where you are in your process.
I don't know where I am. So I did that for about a year and felt better and went off the medication. And then the real sort of menopause symptoms, and I don't even know what to call them, really started hitting me about my mid-50s. So still bleeding, but I had all of these other symptoms, like, you know how they say you get dry skin? You know, I'm an unusual symptom person. I'm like, you know, when they go in really rare instances, this happens. I'm the rare instances person, always have been. There's something called formication. Do you know what this is?
No.
Formication, like fornication, but with an M, is when you have the sensation that bugs are crawling under your skin.
Oh,
so
Jesus.
I know you might not want to ever air this, Bree, because it just may terrify people. But again, I was like, I never heard this. And believe me, I've been reading the books. Like I've been reading, you know, Kristen. I've been, you know, Dr. Kristen, I'm reading you, you know, and it was like, what the fuck? So I was having these symptoms of like, I was still getting my period, very light, like hardly worth anything. Feelings, I was getting about, and this is not an exaggeration, I was probably getting about 30 hot flashes a day. Like I was just continually, and I also know stress brought them on. And I was working in a high school for kids with developmental and intellectual delays. So I was like stressed all day long. I want to tear off my clothes and jump out and win. And it's very distracting. I mean, people really don't understand what, you know, hot flushes or hot flashes do, which is it just totally distracts you from whatever moment you're in, because you're just like, I am burning from the inside out. I'm burning alive right now. I can't even hear what you're saying because I'm, you know. So the three big ones for me were the formication.
The bugs crawling under your skin.
Yeah, bugs crawling under my skin. It was unbelievable. It wasn't just like itchy, dry skin. It was like things were moving in there. It was so bizarre. You know, so many hot flashes, I couldn't even begin to count them. And then my cognitive issues started to happen where I thought I had Alzheimer's or something. I was terrified. I couldn't read really anymore. I could only read, like I'd sit down to read just a magazine or something. And I would read one sentence and then I'd start on and then I'd have to go back and I would read the sentence again and I would read the sentence again. I couldn't add, sort of like any math things were really hard. And then also my conversational skills dropped significantly. I was monosyllabic, basically, and I was terrified. And the only thing that helped me was talking to another woman who said, oh, I had some of those. And I went to see this woman doctor. I will never have another male doctor in my life, ever, ever, ever. I don't care, unless it's a surgeon or something. Will not see male doctors anymore. Something happened at, you know, around 50 where this sort of weird dismissive thing started happening. And, you know, we hear about it, but yeah. So, and I'm like, I'm an intelligent, attractive woman. Like, why don't you see me? And she said, I'm going to see this gynecologist, a young woman, smart as all hell. And she took all my hormone levels and she said, you have 0 testosterone. And I was like, oh, because I was waiting for estrogen dips and progesterone dip, you know, all that stuff. And I had for about a year been over the counter medicating with the, I don't know what it is, that the over the counter stuff, like progesterone creams that I could buy over the, you know, I was doing all
like
my
yam
research.
Cream or something.
Yeah, I was doing all my research on like menopause, what can I do? What can I do? And what were those things? Oh, they're very popular. It was estrogen. And they did help a little bit. But she said, yeah, you know, you're having cognitive issues because you have no testosterone. She was like, and usually there's about like 3% is low and you have none. And she put me on bioidentical hormones that I get at a compounding pharmacy. And like the next day, I was like back on, it was like a miracle to me. And I've been on those for about 5 years. So that's why I'm telling you, I don't know where I am because I haven't gone off of them to see where I am. But I'm not getting my period. I haven't had my period for like 5 years. Stopped getting it when I went on the hormones.
So of course, everybody is different, right? So
Yep.
we're not saying everybody needs to go on testosterone, but
Nope.
did you find that all of those, so the brain fog, the hot flashes, the skin crawling, all of that stopped once you started
Yep.
testosterone?
Yep.
Yay. Thank goodness for modern science and good doctors and a good
doctors.
friend.
And like this, if this is like, it's from somebody talking to me and saying, oh, this is who I see. And she did this for me. What happened with me was different than what happened with my friend, but at least it was a doctor who I could talk to. And when I went to see my GP, my male GP during those years, he frowned on it. And I was like, yeah, you're going to have to take my right arm before you convince me to not do this. And then a couple years later, he must have gotten educated because he changed his tune.
Well, that's also part of this too, right? It really does take courage to speak up and advocate for yourself with your doctor. It's not easy. And as women, I feel like we are often, our perspective is trivialized. I mean, I have been in a doctor's office and seen, I have a great doctor now. So current doctor, I don't want you to feel like I'm talking about you, but I have been in a doctor's office and seen like a true eye roll, like you are crazy, woman.
Yeah.
So the sexism that is there, it's cultural, right? And it's in our education system, it's in our political system, it's in our insurance system, it's everywhere, right? So
Yep.
So it takes some extra ovaries.
That's what those little eggs were in there.
So now that you're on the other side of it, I'm really curious because you touched on something that I have to say I'm kind of fascinated with, because I'm hoping it can be a superpower. I know that I am probably naive in thinking this, but this idea of having invisibility, of being invisible, which is threatening, right? When we've depended on our identity as young, fertile women and strong, fertile women, right? Or whatever. For that to then be completely displaced. I don't know if it is completely displaced. I guess that's my question for you. Can you tell me more about that notion?
I feel like, I'm lucky because I have a husband who's quite a bit younger than I am. So, well, lucky and not lucky, because there's a lot of times I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, like I'm going to be 60 and I'm not looking like I did when you met me when I was 40, because 40's good. 40's a good that's a good decade. Then you get to 50 and then you're like, what? You're like, oh shit, this is not for sissies. I felt it more just in the general public, I think. And sometimes, it's great. The invisibility is great. And then sometimes it's not when you want to be heard. And part of that journey for me has been the journey of letting go and understanding like there are generations behind me that are now having their turn. And I would like to become I have definitely become more of a mentor and really taking on that role. Like my ambition has probably gone to zero. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in the best way possible. Like I have nothing to prove to anyone anymore. And if you don't want what I have, I don't really care. I have a lot to offer. And if there's someone that wants to take advantage of that or listen to that, like yourself or some other women out there or whoever it is, I'm happy to offer it. But I have nothing that I'm trying to do anymore. like nothing. And I mean that very literally, like nothing. Like somebody asked me recently, I hope they don't listen to this, to help. There was a chapter coming in a book for some of the work that I was doing with some other creative art therapists. And I was like, I've written my chapters and I do understand kind of how thankless the whole process is. Like, I'm published. I'm published. And I was like, I think that I will help you guys in the way of guidance, but I am not putting, just like, it's not how I want to spend my time. But it's important that you guys get published, right? Like you just turned 40. Some of them are not even 40. Some of them are like 35. And so that is really, I like that role a lot. And the other thing that happens is, oh shit, I just lost it because that's what happens. But I like that role a lot. And also, it'll come to me. It'll come to me.
I love this idea of moving from a position of proving oneself and striving and trying to accomplish things, being productive in a way that's, you know what I mean?
I do.
Moving from that to this place of really legacy, right? Of how can we leave the world better than it was when we arrived? And I think women have to kind of lead the way on that, honestly. And that's in terms of how we take care of each other. And it's also environmental. How are we taking care of the earth? How are we taking care of our society? How are we managing the incredible inequities that we have in our culture? We could go way down there. And I say that menopause is a good start for that in many ways, because we're also having to speak up for ourselves, not to prove ourselves, to have a presence. We have a culture that essentially says, you as women are not valued once you are no longer having kids, right? You're valuable when you look a certain way, when you have a certain body type, when you fulfill our male needs in a certain way. And it's an opportunity for us to step into more of the maven role, right? Rather than the maiden or matron, to step into this maven and later crone roles of really truly taking care of the things from a different vantage point. I was talking to another guest and she talked about killer whales that there are only 2 species of animals that live beyond menopause, and that have females that live beyond menopause. And those are killer whales and humans. And that we play an absolutely invaluable part in the structure of society by being here. And we can have a good 50 years post-menopause, right? Like we can have far more time after menopause than we had being fertile. Mind blown.
I think as far as society goes, yes, but also the internal journey for me, like when we talk about proving things, it's mostly for myself. That journey of like self-acceptance is huge. Like I remember when I was 30, how I looked at a 50-year-old, or when I went back, I taught theater at USF for a few years, and I'm looking at these like 18 or 19-year-old students, and I'm like, some of them have parents that are younger than I am. And I'm thinking back to when I was 20, when I was 50 something at this time, if I had a 40-year-old professor, it was like they were ancient. So just this like wrapping my mind around this idea of self-acceptance for myself in the process, is huge. Because of course I'm much more interested in myself than I am in society,
I love that about you.
That's another thing that's happened.
That you're more interested in yourself than in society? Yes. Tell me about that. Tell me more about that.
Well, it just, the whole thing has been a journey of self-acceptance for me. And this idea that there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time trying to not age. And it's like, but you are, Blanche, you know? And I am. And it's just that idea of trying to find where I'm comfortable each step of the way. And, you know, this thing of losing ambition, sort of, in the best possible way, is also for me not having to prove anything to myself anymore about how much I can do or how good I am, or am I the best, or am I doing my best even? It's like, if I'm showing up today, that's my best, you know, like, and so, you know, the physical and emotional stuff, I think I've kind of worked through that part of menopause, but I really like this other side of it, where I really am just interested in myself. And it also goes back to looking at what is coming, letting them take it. It's like, you're 20, you're 30, you're 40. It's your society now. Like, it's yours. You're running everything, or you should be. And I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to help where I can, but I don't feel the need to be on the front lines anymore. I'm more interested in myself and my piece of the world, and making that what I want it to be. And, you know, the best it can be, I guess. But, you know, I don't have much interest in those bigger things anymore, which, you know, I did for a long time. I mean, yeah. I do, but it's almost like from a bird's eye. It's almost from like, I don't feel in it anymore. I mean, I'm still here, but I'm not driving it anymore, you know? Yeah. And I'd like to help the people that are driving it if they want it, you know, like we've said, but I don't know. I'm here for that, but I'm not throwing myself out there anymore, you know?
You're sitting in the back of the limousine giving the directions to the chauffeur.
Or not, or just like, take me wherever you want.
I'd love to know because you're married and
Mm-hmm.
you have a younger husband, how has your relationship changed during perimenopause and then also in postmenopause?
Well, you know, as I'm getting older, so is he. And that's really fun to be a part of too. And I think that I know we didn't talk about it a lot, but he probably had his own struggles and adjustments to make to having an older wife. And, you know, he's a real cutie. So there's a lot of that in there. But I think as he's gotten older, I mean, I think the most endearing thing he says to me is, you have to last. So we've finally gotten to a point where it's just like, you need to take care of your health. You need to keep moving around. You gotta last. And so that's kind of where we are.
May we all have someone in our lives who says, you have to last. You have to last.
We have a great relationship. I highly recommend it for anyone to have a age difference. I mean, there are those worries that come along with that, especially as a woman. But there's also like, we don't compete the way a lot of couples do. We're not in any kind of competition with each other because we are at different places and we know we're at different places. So he's very good at understanding my transitions and what I'm up for and what I'm not. And, you know, he's still at his place in life where it does matter what he's doing. You know, that he is accomplishing and things like that. You know what I mean?
I do. And you all have some plans to go off grid. Is that right?
Yes. We're going to build a house in the mountains. And as you know, it's the best place you can be. Yes. We're going to make our own we got about 3 acres and we're just going to, I say it's our starter and our finisher.
I love it. And what a beautiful place to disappear, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
To fold into the mountains.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, if you had to offer women who are just going into perimenopause one piece of advice, what would it be?
Go easy on yourself and do everything you can to not suffer. You don't have to suffer. Oh. You just have to find the right combination of either a doctor or, you know, you don't have to just suffer your way through it, and get a good female support group.
I love
That's
that.
not one, that's a bunch, but yeah, find a good doctor that you trust that's up on, I didn't know what a compounding pharmacy was or did, stuff like that. So find a doctor that's young and educated, and don't suffer. You don't have to suffer through it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much.
Asking me. I hope I don't scare people away. If you might listen to it, you're like, we can't put this on. We can't.
No, it is scary, but the thing is that we actually need to tell the scary stories, and we need to know, hey, if you're having these scary feelings, you're not crazy.
Right.
This is really happening.
Yeah. And your body is just going through so much, just like when they talk about when you're starting to get your period, it's your body is going through so much, and your hormones are going through so much that you don't really have any control over, but you also don't just have to like ride it out. Like, there is help out there.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. It's weird. I don't know. I'm glad you're doing this because I think it's important.
Here are my key takeaways from this conversation with Lisa. Number 1, find a doctor who is up to speed on perimenopause. Once Lisa found a physician who would listen to her and come up with a treatment plan that fit her specific needs, it was a total game changer. Number 2, remember that you don't have to suffer. If you are having intense symptoms, talk to someone. Find someone you trust and really talk about it. Number 3, get a social support structure in place. That can be in person, online, official groups, or just sitting around with your friends. Sharing our perspectives is a great way to contextualize our experiences. Thank you so much for listening to the Pause to Go podcast. If you got something out of this episode, let us know. Share it with a friend, join our Facebook group, and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts if you loved it. If not, no worries. We want you to tell it like it is, and we'd love to have your input. If you want to know more about what I'm up to, you can follow me on Instagram at The Lovely Unbecoming or at my website, thelovelyunbecoming.com. Stay curious, y'all.